We already did the college football quarterbacks that are going to impact who makes the playoff, but how about the wide receiver position? Because in college football, you might be able to shut down one good or great wide receiver, but if last year's college football playoff taught us anything, it's that the entire wide receiver and tight end unit you gotta be worried about. There were 12 combined wide receivers and tight ends drafted in 2024 that participated in the college football playoff, and 7 combined in the championship between Washington and Michigan alone. Here are my top 10 wide receiver units in college football headed into 2024. Make sure that you guys like, subscribe, tell a friend about the Unafraid Show, and of course, share and leave your favorite wide receiver cores down in the comments. Number 10, Oklahoma. Everybody wants to know if Oklahoma is going to get away with letting Dillon Gabriel go to Oregon and throwing their support behind Jackson Arnold at quarterback. Well, I'm here to tell you that if the receiving core factors in, Arnold should be just fine. Even without Drake Stoops, the Sooners are returning 2,400 yards just from the receivers that are coming back. And these kids are big, fast, and proven producers. Let's just run down this list. Jalil Farouk returns for his senior season after posting almost 700 yards last year. Nick Anderson and his 6'4 frame return after a 10-touchdown season in 2023 where he averaged 21 yards a catch. Andrell Anthony might have only had 1 touchdown last year, but he averaged 16 yards a catch and went for over 100 yards against Tulsa and Cincinnati. Plus, when you have 6'5 Jaden Gibson coming off a year where he averaged 35 yards a catch and finished the regular season scoring in 3 straight games, combined, you have that with the influx of transfer tight ends and promising youngsters like Zion Kearney and Jaquez Petaway, Jackson Arnold is going to be just fine. Number 9, LSU. If LSU isn't wide receiver you already, it's on the way. Since 2018, the Tigers have had 6 wide receivers drafted in the first or second round of the NFL draft. So how are the Tigers supposed to cope with losing Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas in conjunction with having to replace Heisman-winning quarterback Jaden Daniels? Well, it's nice to have some guaranteed production back in the form of big tight end Mason Taylor, as well as 5th-year senior Kyron Lacey coming back. And that's 900 yards receiving right there. And with some of the stars out of the way, we might finally see the emergence of Chris Hilton Jr., who was a Louisiana high school legend prior to committing to LSU. But these transfers are going to make things interesting. You got Xavier Thomas, who had 500 yards receiving in a bad Mississippi State offense last year. And you had CJ Daniels, who had over 1,000 yards last year at Liberty, including 500-plus yard performances and an 8-catch game against Oregon. Number 8, Texas. But George, they lost everybody to the NFL. And the system works. Wide receivers across the country, they saw that. And so you have Georgia high school track champion Isaiah Bond leave Alabama to become the new Xavier Worthy. And you had Matthew Golden take his 11 career receiving touchdowns at Houston and head to Austin to see if he can become the next Adonai Mitchell. And Oregon State Silas Bolden might not be big enough to be the next Jordan Whittington as far as an NFL prospect. But I'm telling you right now, he can step into that Longhorn offense and give you 500-plus yards all purpose without breaking a sweat. And what I'm most interested to see is if the incoming transfers are held off by the youngsters like Jonte Cook II and DeAndre Moore. Plus, what they lack at production in tight end, they make up for with experience with Gunnar Helm, Juan Davis, and Alabama transfer Amari Niblack. Number 7, Miami. Miami fans got the news that Xavier Restrepo was running it back after an 85 reception season and that they had to feel pretty good about their situation at wideout heading into 2024. And even with Kobe Young and Brashard Smith hitting the portal, of course it helps that they landed Cam Ward out of Washington State to help Restrepo get the ball this year. But who else will Ward have to throw to? Let's take a look. Well, Sam Brown comes over as a fifth-year junior from the University of Houston and brings over 800 receiving yards in 2023 with him. And then they also have Jacoby George returning to Miami this year, and that gives them 3 wide receivers that had at least 800 yards last season. Can anybody else boast that? If one of the young guys can break through like a Robbie Washington or a Ray Joseph, then this team will be electric in the ACC. Plus, nobody else out there has a ninth-year player that can catch passes. Shout out to Cam McCormick. The dude is old enough to rent a car, and a former Oregon Duck. Number 6, Colorado. They have Travis Hunter. And the only person that anybody should trust to cover Travis Hunter is Travis Hunter. But beyond that, Shedeur Sanders has to love that he also has Jimmy Horn Jr. coming back, as well as Omarion Miller, who flashed some serious talent last season. But what we really have to look at is what Coach Prime did in the portal. He got a top 3 wide receiver transfer in LaJohntay Porter out of FAU, who had almost 110 catches and 1,200 yards last year. Plus a promising young deep threat in Terrell Timmons out of NC State, and one of the SEC's most consistent possession wide receivers the last 3 years in Will Shepherd. As long as Colorado's offensive line holds up, this is easily one of the best units in all of college football. Number 5, the Georgia Bulldogs aren't reliant on their wideouts in order to win. Last year's dynamic duo of Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers only caught an average of 9 combined balls per game that they played in, and Georgia rolled anyway. But their quarterback, Carson Beck, he's coming back, and he's got a lot to work with. Just because the numbers aren't crazy doesn't mean that there aren't threats out in Athens. Dom Lovett has been a productive wide receiver in the SEC the last 3 years, and he'll headline a group that includes 6'3", 215-pound Kobe Young, who came over from Miami, Michael Jackson III, who spent the last 3 years at USC, and Vanderbilt transfer London Humphreys, who caught a touchdown as a freshman against Georgia just last year. And not to mention that they also have the number 1 tight end in the 2022 class, Oscar Delp, and the number 2 tight end in the 23 class, Lawson Lucky, on their roster as well. And if Kirby Smart is really in a pinch, he can do what Coach Prime did with Travis Hunter and put KJ Bolden out at wide receiver if he needs to. Number 4, Missouri. Missouri was a problem last year. And this year, all 3 of their top wide receivers return in the form of Luther Burden, Theo Wees, and Mookie Cooper. That's 180 yards a game, without even including that last year freshman Marquise Cooper had 7 games where he averaged at least 20 yards per reception. And the Tigers' already impressive run game is set to improve. So good luck to everybody trying to figure out who and when to double somebody, because Missouri quarterback Brady Cook might deserve more Heisman hype than I've been giving him so far, and he has the wide receivers to help him out. Number 3, Ohio State. I could just say that they have Emeka Egbuka and just move on to the next team, but we need to talk about the rest of this roster that is just waiting on the right QB to help them pop off. First, you have Carnell Tate, the number 3 wide receiver prospect in the class of 2023, and the number 1 player in the country coming out of high school last year in Jeremiah Smith. Do you want to know what player comps 247 gave to those guys coming out of high school? Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. Now, if the experts are right, who is slowing these wide receivers down? Number 2, Ole Miss. The Rebels returned 2 players that caught at least 50 balls and averaged at least 14 yards per catch in 2023. Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins, but the cupboard was pretty bare otherwise. That is, until the Portal King himself, Lane Kiffin, made sure that his quarterback Jackson Dart has plenty of options heading into this season. Let's start with Juice Wells, who was one of the most productive wide receivers in the country as a sophomore in 2021 at James Madison. Wells transferred to South Carolina, where he had nearly 1,000 yards as a junior while being named first-team All-SEC, but missed last season with a foot injury. Lane Kiffin also brought in a fifth-year junior from Southern Illinois named Isaiah Hartrup, who has over 100 career receptions already. As long as the Rebels can get some tight end production out of West Virginia transfer Daquan Wright, they should have one of the top wide receiver rooms in college football. Number 1, the Oregon Ducks. If we're only talking about the returning production that was on last year's team, then my Ducks are in fantastic shape. Between Terrence Ferguson, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, and Gary Bryant Jr., that's 178 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns per game. But we don't even have to talk about just those 4. We also have former number 1 high school receiver in Evan Stewart coming over from Texas A&M, and he's already got 1,100 plus yards receiving to his name. Plus, defenses are going to have to worry about 6'5", 200-pound Kyle Casper heading into his second year as well. Make sure that you guys leave your favorite wide receiver core and your top 10 down in the comments.